today I'm very happy to have a special guest with me today, Ted Saunders, who is a product manager with Moritz CX. And Ted's got a great level of expertise for us today to share about designing questionnaires when we're concerned about being mobile first in our design. So welcome, Ted. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Catherine.
So I'm going to just jump right into it. I've prepared a couple of questions for us. And so what I'd like to start with is, I think, an easier way to kind of segue into the topic, which is, one of the challenges I think a lot of folks have who do survey research is that we're very aware these days that we have to be designing for mobile participants. We know that a large percent of our participants in many online surveys will be on mobile devices, but mobile is pretty diverse, right? I mean, I could be on an iPhone or an Android, I could be on a smartphone or a tablet, and I guess I wonder how much granularity people need to have in terms of understanding their participants. Is it enough to design for mobile, or do you really have to understand what all the nuances are between all the flavors of mobile?
Well, it's going to be difficult to design for every single type of mobile device. There's literally thousands of them out there, and to make it work everywhere, you'd really have to go to the lowest common denominator. It'd be a very simple survey. So I think what your best approach would be is to look at the devices your audience is likely to be using. In the United States, that's primarily iPhones and Android devices. You can find stats out there. You can also look at past surveys if you're working with a vendor that provides device tracking to better understand where you need to test. I think testing should go a step further than just device type as well. The browsers do have differences in the way they display some common question types. Things as simple as drop-downs might display differently on one browser on the same device versus another browser, and that can impact scores in the respondent experience. So it really depends upon how deep you want to go, but we would recommend understanding your audience and testing on the most common devices that audience is using. And as far as testing, that can be either acquiring devices, or there's also several emulators out there. If you're just testing one survey, a lot of the emulators have free services you can go to. So companies like Device Anywhere or Browser Stack, and you can Google and get a free test out of them and test your survey that way across multiple devices and browsers.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I was actually going to ask you about testing, because I know that sometimes people will say, well, I checked out the questionnaire on my phone and it looked fine. And I think what you're saying is that may not be enough.
Yeah, I think you want to go a little bit further than that. Going back to the browser issue, I mean, one thing we've uncovered in some of our testing with the drop-downs is an Android default browser with a drop-down will only display the top 3 answer choices, and there is a next button to advance to the full scale, and potentially if there's more than 6, you need to click next multiple times to see the full set of response options. But when that's out there, it's not necessarily intuitive to a survey taker. So when we've done our testing, we find on that particular browser, people are much likely to choose one of the first 3 responses than if they're on an Android device using a Chrome or Firefox browser, or if they're on an iPhone where they have the roller bar. They're going to be more easily able to view all the answer choices, and you'll see a more even distribution of responses on those browsers versus the default. So because of that, that's just one example, but we recommend against using drop-downs. And there's other examples, but that's one for a common question type where you'd want to test on multiple devices just to see how that question comes across.
And when you're doing that kind of testing and you're testing across multiple devices and multiple browsers, if a researcher is trying to do this on their own and they want to see whether or not it has an impact, is it just a matter of looking at, say, some pre-test results and looking at, how long it took people to complete the survey on different devices, or are there other things they should be looking for?
I think the starting point before you go to field is to just visually see what it's like for yourself. Think what it would be like for you if you were the responder. Are you able to accomplish the tasks you're asking them to easily with that device type? But we also recommend looking at things post-field. If you do a soft launch, go back in there and look at the data. Depending upon the platform you're using, you might be able to look at device type. We'd recommend separating out completion rates by device type, so you're able to see if there is potentially a certain type of device that's having issues. They'll have lower completion rates. You'll want to go back in, look at the survey, and figure out where the problem is to fix it. And beyond just completion rates, we really recommend looking at the scores. because sometimes a respondent can complete a question easily, but they're not seeing it the way it's intended to be displayed, which would lead to a different response from that device category than others. So it's kind of a combination of the user experience measured by completion rates and quality of response. We're looking at the scores broken out by device categories.
Excellent. And so when you say looking at scores, so I might have, a number of questions in my questionnaire. I would go through the questions and I would look at my descriptives and I would look to see whether or not there is a difference by device type.
It depends on what type of programming software you're using, but to the extent you have the ability to do that, that would absolutely be recommended.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. That's a wonderful tip. I love that. Now, if an organization is in a place where they're obviously they know they need to be mobile first these days with their design. Maybe they're looking at survey platforms. Maybe they haven't standardized one yet, or maybe they've outgrown their current one. So there are cases where an organization, where an insights team or market research company might be planning to reevaluate online survey platforms. If they're out there today evaluating online survey platforms and they want to make sure that they choose or shortlist those that really do have the ability to support their needs for mobile first surveys. Do you have any tips for what they should be looking out for when they are trying to come up with that shortlist?
Yeah, I think there's two areas you want to look at. One is just the technology. I mean, right now, mobile's a pretty common term. Everybody knows they need to be mobile friendly. So any firm you talk to, if there's just a checkbox, they're going to tell you, yes, we are. And really, any type of survey can be viewed on a browser. That doesn't mean it's a good experience. So from a technology perspective, I think you'd want to know their approach. What are they doing? Are they able to identify the type of devices coming into the survey? And how do they treat mobile respondents differently? They should have some metrics for you. So they should be able to show you the percentage coming in by different device types. That tells you they're measuring it. And beyond that, I think some guidance in terms of what can and can't be done really needs to go beyond the technology. So just a technology play can kind of box you in. You know, if you're only able to use certain question types, that may be fine for you, but if you want to have the liberty to choose any type of question and put it out there, some guidance on how to best formulate those questions so they work in a smaller screen could be valued. So I would ask them what type of testing they do, what type of guidance they give you when you're ready to field your study, how they can support your needs. So it's, again, a technology to make sure that they're able to work within their platform to display the questions in a way that works for a smaller screen, but also guidance for different types of questions, how they can best help you formulate those.
I really like your point about the different questions because obviously there are a lot of different scales and question types people use these days. Obviously, a lot of people do use rating scales, but people still, you see a lot of questionnaires with ranking scales and constant sum and other types of scales that can require a little bit more effort, I would imagine, especially in a mobile device. So I think that's a great idea about understanding how different platforms can work with different types of scales in a mobile environment. That's a great point.
Yeah, we'll have some research at the Insights Association conference at the end of April, early May, around scale design, whether you can change scales from horizontal to vertical on different device types, how many scale points you can accommodate without it becoming a problem. So we'll have more to share on that. That is some of our most recent testing.
Excellent. I love especially that point about scale points, and I'm looking forward to your research on that because, of course, a lot of the traditional research, mobile aside, but a lot of the traditional research about scale validity, especially for rating scales anyway, often ends up, focusing people on 5 to 7 point scales. So I'm very curious to see what you folks end up recommending based on your research.
Yeah, and it really comes down to the amount of text in the scale labels than the scale points. It's a common question. It is possible to display 10-point scales without a problem if you just have good, poor endpoint anchors. That's more easily to achieve than a 3-point scale with a lot of text in each label. So there's different ways to look at it. It's a simple question with a more complex answer.
Excellent. Great. Well, Ted, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. And I know you're going to be talking more, as you mentioned, at the Insights Association conference. The next conference is at the end of April. I think it's actually bridges over into May 1st. It's going to be in New York City, so the Insights Association Next conference, I know you and some colleagues will be presenting at that conference on designing for mobile research participants. So I know everybody will be looking forward to hearing more about your research there.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much, Ted. Have a great day.
Thank you.